about the migrant crisis. He puts it in capitals, so I know you mean business, Howard. He says the reason why he's sick of hearing about it, in his words, not mine, he says, the battle is lost. Basically, no one's going to do anything. He says he doesn't feel like anything's going to happen. So all this conversation is pretty much pointless. And it got me thinking, Ben Habib, there is a lot of stuff going on at the moment about what we do when, people get here. Do we send them on this barge? Do we send them to this island? What do you do? The conversation about how actually to stop people and defend our waters, etc., in the first place seems to have almost died a death now.
Completely. I mean, we've never had the political will or courage to actually stop the boats, have we? We've tried any and all measures, with the exception of actually stopping the boats. And when Rishi Sunak says his top pledge, well, his top of his 5 pledges is to stop the boats, or was it the bottom one? I can't remember.
He's got in a minute. In fact, actually, you've just teed it up nicely, because he had a 5-point plan, right? But today he's unveiled like a sub-plan. It's like a 5-point plan within the 5-point plan. Let's just have a little listen to this. This one's specifically about the boats.
Here are 5 things I'm doing to stop the boats. First, I'm bringing in new laws that will mean if you come to the UK illegally, you can't stay, no matter how hard you try. Second, I've secured a deal with France that will help stop the boats at source before they cross the channel. I've also negotiated a deal with Albania, which has already helped us bring down crossings from there by 90%. Third, I've increased raids by 50% to clamp down on illegal workers. Fourth, I'm ending the farce of illegal migrants being put up in hotels by the taxpayer. Fifth, I'm ensuring that the only way to come to the UK for asylum will be through safe and legal routes. I know stopping the boats is a priority for the British people, and I'm leaving no stone unturned to get it done.
Well, the conspicuous absence there was actually stopping the boats. We have a border force, we have a navy.
I find that weird.
Oh,
yeah,
well, the whole thing's
I
weird,
sat and watched that. I mean, I saw it earlier on. I watched that back again then. And I find myself kind of thinking, it's almost like it's not real. It's almost like some kind of weird sitcom. It's just weird, odd.
Well, I mean, when I was hearing the news about the barge today, I was thinking this is almost like Carry On Migration. Do you remember the Carry On films?
No, I'm only 21, Ben Habib. I'm way too young now, Jones.
But, I mean, it is becoming a farce. If you're a smuggler of people and you want to cross the channel with a whole load of illegal migrants, you look at what's happening in the UK, you look at the failure in Rwanda, you look at the failure of the Nationality and Borders Bill, you look at the failure of the Illegal Migration Bill, which is yet to make it onto the statute books, and contrary to what Rishi Sunak just said, there will be a massive carve-out for the European Court of Human Rights in that very act. You look at all of this and you just end up laughing, including our inability to move illegal migrants from hotels onto a barge which has a gym, a snooker table, 24/7 medical care, taxis in and out of Portland, a shuttle bus to take you to the point of collection. I mean, we couldn't be treating these people, in a more civil, generous, hospitable manner.
I mean, this whole thing is a cruel theatre. That's actually what it is. OK, if you actually wanted to reduce the number of people who are risking their lives crossing the channel, you would actually have safe routes. There are no safe routes for people to claim asylum to come into this country unless you're coming from Ukraine or Hong Kong.
Or Afghanistan.
Which is basically closed. The Home Affairs Select Committee report said it's basically closed. So there's effectively no legal route from Afghanistan, which is why in the crossings last year, the largest country people were coming from was Afghanistan. So if we want to help people that are fleeing war and persecution, there is no way, there is no safe route. And this barge and all the latest, we'll send a few people here, a few people there, there is a backlog of 170,000 cases to be processed. And year on year, the government is reducing the ability to process those cases. Just this weekend, the 60 legal firms that do the legal work for migrants have written to the Justice Secretary saying they're not going to do it anymore because the fees have been capped since 2005. The amount that's spent on translators has reduced. We don't have enough caseworkers. If you want to process the cases, it's not about moving 500, let's say 500, even though that's double what the
That's
safe
pretty
limit
good, though, isn't it? Capping
500
costs, putting a limit on costs, I would say, is pretty sensible.
Well, not if you're not processing the 170, which they aren't. The 170,000 backlog cases that need to be processed to work out what are people's needs, what are people's rights, how can they be helped. That's not being done. So all of this stuff is...
They threw the rule book out of the window the other day, James. I don't know if you saw that, saying that actually you don't have to present yourself, you don't have to answer any questions, fill this form in, and we'll speed up your asylum process. Do you remember that?
Do you know what?
For 12,000 people.
For 12,000 people from Afghanistan.
For 12,000 people who were, I think, the oldest on the waiting list.
And they were also from countries with a 98 or 99% acceptance thing. So in an ideal world, would you do that? No. In an ideal world, everyone would have a face-to-face interview and you do all of that stuff. But when the backlog is this big...
When you're saying, oh, you've got this really high acceptance rate, do you think that's because people are genuinely meeting the criteria, or do you think that's because people are now become so smart at fiddling the system that actually there's massive flaws in the system? Because I would say it's the latter.
I think if you're coming from Afghanistan...
But you're coming from France, though, aren't you? You might have originated wherever, but you're coming from France.
Right, and people stop moving when they feel safe. People from Afghanistan might have completely legitimate connection to Britain, given that we occupied their country for 20 years. They might have worked with the BBC, with other British institutions. They might speak English. There are perfectly understandable reasons. If you were an Afghan... person who was, for example, you had this job in Afghanistan, for example, you might want to leave the country now because of the conditions in which it...
We have granted asylum to a lot of Afghanis.
The question I was being asked, though, is do I think they're fiddling the system? I think the equivalent of Michelle in Afghanistan, if they claim asylum here, no, of course they're not fiddling the system.
But we have had very cast iron evidence now of there is a whole racket set up from whether it's lawyers helping people to cheat the system, whether it's medical people helping people cheat the system by giving them kind of falsified information, if you like, when it comes to people's medical records. We hear now today that apparently some people have been stopped getting on these boats, these barges or whatever, because they've got so much trauma being surrounded by water that this barge is going to trigger their thing. Well, if you've got so much trauma that gets triggered by surrounded by water, why have you just got on a dinghy then? Where was your trauma then? It don't wash with me.
Yeah.
I find, OK, firstly, in any system, is there going to be a little bit of action around the edges? In every single system there is, right? But what we're talking about here is, in the main, people fleeing war and persecution in their countries, trying to start a new life here, trying to contribute to our societies. These people are not a threat to us. They're not a threat
James, of course there could be a threat to us. We don't know who these people are. They dispense with their paperwork before they get here. We've got no clue. The whole point about border control, and not talk, the whole point about border control is to be able to control who's coming into the country, in part including knowing who they are.
Which is why you need to have a proper process to be able to assess the cases. 10 years ago, before a lot of these cuts, 98% or something of cases were assessed in 6 months. Now it's almost zero. That's where we have a problem, and barges and Rwanda and any of those things isn't going to solve it at all. It just carries on this cruel theatre.
Last week, I was talking about, I think it was Mel Stride's idea about over 50s getting on their bikes and delivering pizzas. Do you remember that? I'm sure it was only a few days ago, maybe Thursday or Friday or whatever. And I was thinking this weekend, why isn't there a policy then? If you've got all these over 50s that are economically inactive, you're desperate to get them into the world of work again, why don't you create like a crack team of, like experts now, get people back in from industry, train them up and get them processing the asylum backlog? Why isn't that the focus? Why instead are we telling people to deliver pizzas? That might be a fast way of getting it done. Would you go back into the workplace to help tackle this asylum backlog? Good idea.